Monica.
That's me, the one and only, thank God.
How you doing?
I'm great. It's so good to have you in my home.
I'm glad to be inside your home.
Thank you.
For people who may not be familiar with yourself, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So, Monica Matthews, media personality, author, mother, grandmother, widow, Christian, not necessarily in that order, Grammy nominated singer. And I'm starting my own media network. So got a lot going on. That's what I do. Those are things I do, not necessarily who I am. But that's how people would best recognize me. It's just by my work. Yeah.
Excellent. And what did you get, by the way?
Okay, so I got a whole bunch of stuff because I'm not boring. So I got like this giant wrap, which is amazing, and some pad thai, I think. And I'm so excited because I get to show off my chopstick skills. But
excellent. I Michelle knows, my wife. She's tried to get me to use chopsticks, and I look like this.
The claw.
Yeah, and I don't look comfortable whatsoever. I'm like, listen, I'm an American. Give me a fork.
I can literally eat anything with chopsticks. I'm convinced. I will challenge myself to like pick out little pieces of rice. And I don't even know if I'm doing it right. I don't care, but it works.
But it works.
So, yeah, once it works, it's like a roundabout. Once you're on it, you own it. So it's like, if it works, you just go with it.
Exactly.
This is the hard part of breaking bread. You're like, okay, ask me a question right as I'm putting a sushi roll in my mouth. So we're good.
So, what made you want to start your own media company?
So, as with most of the American media consumers, I just fell out of love with my industry. Mm-hmm. And coming from broadcast radio, I've just watched it devolve in the past 9 years that I've been in this industry. And I've watched the country split in half because of primarily what I would consider narrative warfare. And it is a legitimate front of war. And seeing people come up where if everyone's an expert, no one's an expert, right? Mm-hmm. Now everyone's podcasting. Everyone wants to have a name. Everyone's doing X spaces. Everyone wants to be a superstar. Problem with that is that we are in an information war. And I really feel for my audience that they don't know who to believe. They don't know what to believe.
Right.
They're saturated with so much information that you've seen kind of a psychological, emotional, spiritual breakdown of the American voter, the American people in general, who are consumers of information. So I just see a real need there. There's a vacuum has been created, I think, with all of this grift that has entered into the marketplace as well. And so I really want to take it back. I want to take it back to the content creators such as yourself and others who are on board with me, who are serious content creators, who are deliberative people, who respect their audiences and understand the responsibility that comes with giving information.
Yeah.
And I want to reconnect the consumer, not only to having a viable choice that is not partisan. And I really mean that. I'm not just saying that.
Right.
Historically, I've been a conservative, but above all things, outside of partisanship, I'm a Christian. I respect all people. I don't weigh all voices the same. Mm-hmm. I'm a very deliberative person, but I feel like everyone should have an opportunity to be informed, and to read into with respect. And so, my hope is, and my goal, and all of us combined, is to really give it back to the consumer and give it back to the content creator and give it back to the advertiser and take back, really go for advertisers who have let go of their market share due to partisanship. And I think there's a real opportunity there to bridge where some things have been broken down.
I agree with you. And I think it's, God has a plan, and he brought us together at the right time, because I would say, especially the past few months, I've been feeling very fatigued as someone who's involved in the media and contributing articles and things like that. I'm fatigued by the narratives. I'm fatigued by, what am I supposed to be upset about now?
Yeah.
I'm just fatigued by it. And I feel like, while people do appreciate my voice, this small audience I have, they appreciate my voice and my perspective, that I think they deserve more.
Right.
Even just beyond myself, I think they deserve more from the media. And I think one of the reasons why obviously I didn't see myself falling into this when I first wrote my book. But when I started getting into it, I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I should be doing, because everybody else is either super partisan, hyperbolic, ridiculous. No one's utilizing common sense.
Right.
No one's speaking for the average American
Right.
who just wants to take care of their family. And so I was like, yes, I want to interject myself as someone who's been through different economic lines throughout my life, and just sees things in a very rational way, because it's lacking. But after, to a point where it's like, there should be another way for me to contribute. So, whether I write or not, I want to be able to find other ways to help and to contribute. And I think with Thirst, it gives me an opportunity to have other people who are like me, who are equally looking for opportunities to, because every person I talk to about what you're trying to do or what we're trying to do is like, yes.
Right.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
same response
great.
I get.
Everybody's tired of it. Everybody's tired of the clickbait. Everybody's tired of it. And what's a shame for me is that independent media was supposed to be different than corporate media.
Right.
And it ended up turning into basically corporate media.
Correct. Run by nefarious little banshees.
Right.
Well, everyone's out for their own fiefdom.
Right.
It's like King of the Hill is what we're all playing. Well, I'm not. I stepped away because I just recognized that the vacuum that was being created was something that I did not want to be a part of. And yes, I get the same exact response. And what's really funny is, for all of the grief that people on the left get for being divisive, or all the accusations, we're all I don't have to go over them. We're all familiar with them. What's interesting is that the people who are giving me the greatest pushback are actually on the right. They do not want a bridge built to the other side. They're still busy detonating bridges, proverbially speaking. They're detonating cultural bridges. We are at we're also another inspiration for me is, I really believe we're at a dangerous point in the country, that when people say, oh, this is the most important election ever, I'm like, it's not even about the election. We're at a point as a nation, we're at the breaking point as a nation. And you can see that in the rhetoric online. And you can see that when the far right, when the just right of center becomes the far right, which then meets the just left of center becomes the far left, you've got a real problem when that becomes your consensus. And I feel like that's where we are. Yeah. I've been in politics for over 30 years now, writing speeches for state court judges, different people running for office. I've been a part of local campaigns, congressional campaigns as well. I consult on a number of levels with politicians. And so I've seen just kind of this devolution occur, this dissension, if you will, into every man for himself, and it's interesting because the worse it gets from the political perspective, the more idolatrous people seem to become of the people they're supposed to be electing, so there's a lot of ground to recover, I think. And for me personally, I don't think it's too late. I think that offering a nonpartisan platform is going to be, because not only are we nonpartisan, but we're international. So our talent's international. Our C-suite is international. Everything about us it's global from the perspective of, we care about the United States. This is our homeland. This is our country. We love her, and we want her to be able to sustain herself and to flourish again and to unify. We also see that this country has, in fact, been a light upon a hill. And if our light goes out, that means an enormous amount for people across the globe. My family in Europe will tell me that point blank. They're very scared about what's going on here. And so I see it as a way for us to build bridges without having to become part of the globalist agenda. Our globalist agenda at Thirst is to remind people that there's only one race. There's the human race. And we can all still be unique because we were created uniquely. And we all still have very interesting things to bring to the landscape of the globe, whether it's economic, it's creative, it's cultural, it's family, it's life. To quote my show, my podcast, it's life, liberty, and love. It's all of that. So yeah, I'm getting the same feedback from people.
Yeah.
They can't wait.
But what do you think was like the point where like things shifted?
So I watched it really take a turn in 2016 for sure. We started to see that, and I was trying to get the Christian base out to vote. And what was interesting about that is, you had the hard Christian liners who were, life was the foundation of the basis of their vote, which was fine. And they were still holding on tight to that. Kitchen table issues for them, life was the plumb line, period. And I stand by that too. Without, if you're not going to protect life, you're not going to protect anything. So you got to start with life. But Donald Trump really forced people. I see him as someone who was capable of opening that veil for us to really take a look at not only who's behind the curtain, but ourselves. Because right behind the curtain was a giant mirror. I have a giant floor mirror right behind you. And that's what it reminds me of, where people who were historically very diplomatic, very, statesman-like, that's what they hated about him, was that he was not a statesman at all. He wasn't a Republican. He's still not a Republican. He'll probably never be a Republican. And so what you saw was just this instant divide within the Republican Party. And we knew people who were Democrats were never going to be in favor of a Donald Trump. And so I think he was the starting point. His candidacy was the starting point of where we are now. I will take it. I'll roll it back, though. I think where we really started, and I started to see the division in people just kind of in what the hell mode, was during the 8 years of Obama's regime. And that to me is undeniable. And what we saw happen with the constant race rhetoric. If you're Black, you're going to have it harder. Like every speech he and Michelle attended on college campuses were, congratulations, now your hard work really begins. Just kind of this constant droning on about how hard Black Americans have it. It's always going to be that way. And it's just like this drip, drip, drip that I saw happening for 8 years, not to mention the back seat that we took with regard to the Middle East and the relationship between the Islamic agenda, which is obviously very evident now, the seat at the table that Islamists had, not to be confused with Muslims. There's a very clear distinction, a line of demarcation there in terms of ideology and practice. So I feel like he ushered a lot of the things in about us that really started our descent into being ashamed of who we are as Americans.
Mm.
And I saw that really in academia because that's when the rhetoric started. That's where it started. Was our founding fathers were all slave masters, slave owners, awful people. The way we acquired our land, we're all colonizers. And it's like, please find me a parcel of land on planet Earth that was not conquered before it became someone's.
Right.
And so our ability to be proud of who we are in a grateful way as Americans, proud of our ingenuity, proud of our people, recognizing that all Americans are our greatest resource, are our people, all of us. He had a real opportunity to bring the country together. And I saw where he took the opportunity to just slowly pull these little fissures and create fissures within different bodies of people. And then I think by the time Donald Trump came around, it was just a powder keg.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would agree with you, but I would add, because I think there are 3 points.
Okay.
So I agree with you. The Donald Trump point, Obama's, we could say his entire presidency,
right.
just throughout that, leading in that direction, especially like when Michael Brown and all that stuff started happening, which is funny because his DOJ investigated it and they accidentally disproved the narrative about Michael Brown.
Right.
But anyway, that's all of the story.
Right.
I actually think there's a third point, and I think it was George W. Bush's second term.
Okay.
Because his first term was obviously when 9/11 happened.
Right.
And that's the most unified I've ever seen this country.
Sure, me too.
But then it turned into wars.
Right.
And then it turned into, division as far as, are we doing the right thing?
Right.
First we were gung-ho for the wars, like, yes, revenge.
Yeah.
And then it was like, we're still in these places.
We're still here.
20
years later.
We took over Iraq in like 2 weeks and we're still here. Like, what exactly is going on? And then, I was young, but I would probably more so associate myself with the Democrats at the time.
Sure.
And I could see the argument of no blood for oil. I could see the argument for all these things. But I do remember how he was the Antichrist, how he was the devil. He was the second.
Right.
Like, it was just like, it was that type of rhetoric, constantly protesting him, things of that nature. And that's when I started, I think that was like the first crack. And then what was interesting about Obama was supposed to be the great hope, right? Hope and change. And he's like, listen, enough of these dumb wars. We're getting out of there.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Like his campaign was positive.
Yeah. And we needed it.
And
we were broke.
We are Americans. We strive together. We do these things together. And I also think about how the anti-war faction went quiet.
Right.
Stopped talking about it. He didn't leave. He said he was closing down Gitmo. Didn't.
Right.
He said he was getting out of all these places.
Right.
Didn't. I was like, where's the anti-war crowd now?
Right.
Nowhere to be found. So it was very interesting how when he left office, they made up the lie that the only controversial thing he had was wearing a tan suit.
Right.
It's like, it was just like, man, you guys are delusional. I mean, but here's the thing. You believe that lie if you only watch their news sources. That's right. And part of me believed that lie at the time because I only watched those news sources. Right. But when you finally looked at, found out about Fast and Furious, found out about all these different, I'm like, that's a lot. That's a lot. These are very controversial things. And these are things that we should criticize him for. And yeah, he ran on getting us out of these places and he didn't do it. He ran on closing down Gitmo and didn't do it. Like, these were big things. Right. So, but I think once again, the especially with the Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, especially in that situation started happening, that's when you started seeing the leftist ideology really start to come in. You start hearing the racial stuff even more. You start hearing oppression. You start hearing privilege. That's when you really started seeing that seep in. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of like coincidentally, those 3 points, obviously due to the presidency.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, I think, well, coincidentally. So the other thing I've learned, particularly since 2020, is just how, speaking of deliberative, just how strategically deliberative our quote enemies are. People who would love to see us either fail and or, keep us indebted forever.
Right.
Just see our demise as a nation, primarily because of our ideology. Certainly not because of not that they want to cannibalize our resources. They need our resources. That's not it. So when people are freaked out about, oh, we're in a nuclear war on U.S. oil, I'm like, no, we're not. They need them. They need our resources. They're not going to nuke their own resources.
Right.
And we are occupied to a large degree in this country already, whether it's through hardware, it's through technology, it's through, farmland by the millions of acres, which is really scary.
Yeah.
And in places that they are illegally, occupying territory, which is kind of makes you go, how did that happen? We do have laws on the books against being close to military bases. So how did they set up shop there? 2 + 2 really is 4. But what I've learned is that our enemies are very strategic and they're very patient. And their wars are fought in 100-year increments. Ours are not. We fight from election cycle to election cycle.
Yeah.
So the Chinese are not worried about one election cycle over another. And whomever has been strategically positioned within our election cycles and our election grid and our national defense industry, they too know exactly which, underpinnings you would pull out next.
Right.
We have effectively caused all sorts of interesting things to go down across the globe. So I think what people refuse to believe is that those same types of tactics could be deployed on U.S. soil. And that is to our detriment because it wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't by happenstance. It was 1000% executed because someone somewhere or someone's somewhere have decided eons ago that this is exactly how they were going to infiltrate. It's nothing new. Napoleon and all others have always used media, commentary, narrative to the devil himself, for the love of God, use the word against the word himself, right? So narrative, stories, how you spin something. Did God really tell you couldn't eat that thing? And she's like, oh yeah, not only did he tell me we couldn't eat it, but we couldn't touch it either. And he's like, no, that's not how that went down. So twisting of things to infiltrate with this fascist, Marxist, any kind of ist you can think of that is now infiltrated. And how do you do that? Through young minds, through hungry bellies, through broke bank accounts, through housing implosions, through bubbles, jobs, offshoring, high tax bases, constant bureaucracy that's just never ending, where companies are like, screw it, we're going overseas. Why would we, why are we going to subject ourselves to this endless bureaucratic madness? And the American taxpayer, I'll be honest with you, has really no idea what's happening outside of their, can we afford our groceries? And I say this with great respect for my fellow countrymen and women, but it's true. Can we afford our groceries? Can we raise our kids? Can we afford a home? The truth is, one of the reasons why this generation coming up now is so formidable and so open to this type of Marxist ideology is not only because it's been infiltrated in our education system, through our curriculum for years, but also because they really do feel slighted.
Yeah.
They feel we've left them with nothing. And they feel like they don't really have a place of belonging. My daughter is 28. She's a little salty that they can't afford a home. They want to buy a home. This generation still takes pride in home ownership. But as we see, things have become so expensive that the thought of them being able to own a home is just, now they're starting to settle into, well, maybe we'll just rent, you know. And there's something very important about ownership of something, you know. Not that, listen, as Christians, we know we come into this place with nothing, we're going out with nothing, we get it. But there is something about ownership and the pride that comes with caring for something that's yours, cultivating it, you know, husbandry, if you will. So I think those things are important to the fabric of a country, you know, to the confidence of a country, to the unity of a country. And I think the powers that be know that. And so we just become ever so increasingly encroached upon to depend upon the government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. And so one of my gripes with the political right, because they see most young people leaning left. By the way, any demographic that leans left, they think is just this lost cause that they can never.
I know.
And so they must not only abandon them, but ridicule them on the way out. And so when they look at young people, it's, oh, look at these young people going towards leftism. Why would they dare be doing that? But if you put yourself in their position and just think about it for 1 second, yes. Do some of them think they're Zer? And, you know, right. But listen to some of their complaints. Some of their complaints are valid. And when you're someone, while I'm not someone who agrees that we should just wipe everybody's debt clean. And even if we were to do something like that, I don't think that should be the only measure that's done, because then it'll just happen again. So you have to go after the institutions to resolve it so we don't have another debt crisis involving student loan debt. So you have to go after the colleges. You have to attack the entire industry, which no one's willing to do.
It is an industry. It's an industrial complex. Yes.
But I understand why they're upset. I understand that many of them were told, just go to college. Okay, I'll go to college. By their boomer parents or by their Gen X parents. And because they went to college, and when they went to college, it only cost $15,000. Right. Well, guess what? Now you're telling your kid to go to college and it costs them $80,000. And then they come out and the market's oversaturated with college students now, because there's for-profit college. Everybody's just, the entire industry just treats kids like customers. And guess what? All the customers have college degrees. So that bachelor's degree from 40 years ago means very little now. And so here they are, they spent $80,000 for a bachelor's degree that they can't utilize. It's overvalued. And in the market, it is undervalued. So what do they do? So they become the baristas. They take a job and not in the position that they went to school for, saddled with debt that's compounding on interest. So let me ask you, if you're in their position, does socialism sound pretty good to you? Like, it's that kind of thing that they cannot understand the position that these people are in. And the only thing that they can think of is like, listen, daddy government has to do something. And I get it. And I understand where they're coming from. Interesting enough, I'm working on this piece for the New York Post where I'm talking to Black voters in Georgia. And almost all of them said, I asked them, what's your top two policy issues that's leading you to vote for whoever? And they said, my top two policy issues, student loan debt.
Interesting.
It was either one or two. The student loan debt. And all of them were professionals. And if it wasn't for them, it was for the people that they're around who see people who are professionals who are struggling to keep up with this debt. So, you know, I can fully understand why people would start to support these things, and why they feel like, listen, we're maxed out. We're maxed out on credit cards. We're maxed out on debt. We're maxed out. I can't get a better job. I can't work any more hours. And I'm right here. I'm barely holding on. yeah, go ahead and get rid of this debt because that would
Right.
really help me out.
Well, what's interesting though about that is that the debt never really goes anywhere. It's kind of funny, right? Well, it does actually. It comes back to us, the consumer. So it's, or the taxpayer rather. So, you know, I ask people, do you guys think, particularly for people who are like, well, the government should pay this and we should, and I want to jump on board with that. I'm like, okay, I hear you. Totally feel you. Okay, well, let me ask you, do you think there's a money tree behind the United States Capitol? Because the money tree is us. We are the quote slaves.
Mm-hmm.
We feed the beast. And so it gets spread around. It's kind of like Obamacare, you know, it didn't hit me until I was on it. And then I had friends who couldn't afford their own family's insurance. Why? Because they were paying for mine. And I thought, well, this is kind of janky. Like that bothers me. That created a moral conundrum for me because I thought, okay, I know at the time my daughter and I were pretty poor, living on $22,000 a year on survivor's benefits from my husband's death, and had widow's survivor's benefits with her. And we had, she was covered for insurance, but I was not. And we qualified for Obamacare. And we qualified for like the Cadillac of Obamacare, not just like, you know, get your WIC and go pick out some things here and there, get some crappy, you know, insurance. Like I was like, well, if it's going to be $20 a month, then I'm going to get the greatest thing I can. And, you know, I didn't know. And then I started my friends who actually had college degrees, who had 2.5 kids in the minivan and all of that. And they watched their rates go through the roof and they're like, this is not sustainable. We're paying for everyone else who's not paying. And so there's kind of this thing where it's like, it's out of sight, out of mind for people where they don't understand how economics work. They don't understand the flow of cash, the flow of taxation, that we are taxed to death in this country. Consumption to, you know, liquor, gas, groceries, cigarette, you name it. It's your car, it's your home, it's your income, you know, it's just tax after tax after tax after tax. And it's like, what, so those taxes are going somewhere. If they're not going to fight endless wars, then they're going to pay for people who either don't want to afford their student debt or can't, and feed into that industrial complex. So my question is always the same to people. Who do you think's paying that? Because someone is. It doesn't just go away. The debt monster doesn't come and gobble it up under your bed at night. It's just like, poof, it just evaporates. The debt becomes someone else's debt. And so, I mean, that's just basic economics, you know, of how all of that works. So it's a little frustrating. I get it. You know, my kids are excited about it. They're like, what? My daughter's got, well, she should have had a $250,000 student debt. Thank God she's very smart. And she came out with a lot less than that. But even still, she's like, we're struggling over here trying to pay what little debt we do have left.
Yeah.
So they're kind of excited about the prospect. You know, like, but just keep in mind, someone's paying for that somewhere.
I could understand if they wanted to attack the interest rate on it.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's a fair compromise because you can't make headway because it keeps compounding and compounding.
I agree with that.
And there are a lot of people, even if they don't find the job in their interest, they're trying to pay their student loan debt. And it's just like, they can't even get to the principal because the interest is so ridiculous. So I think, to me, if I was to say that there's an opportunity, even for someone like Trump, to me, I'm thinking like, there's your opportunity. Go after the interest. And like for me, when I'm listening to these people talk, and I'm like, all right, we talk in racial demographics. I was like, how do we get Black voters, right?
How do we get them?
How do we get these people?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, okay,
crazy.
all right, here's your opportunity, Trump.
Yeah.
You want to know how you can get Black voters? Go after student loan debt. Just kill the interest.
Right.
Kill the interest, and they'll be like, that's a hell of a lot more than we got from Biden.
That's right.
And I'm like, that's a real thing that you could impact people. And I think that's fair.
Right.
Because the interest is ridiculous for these people. And many of them do want to pay it back. The reason they can't pay it is because the interest is killing them. Right. So I think that's a fair compromise. But I think these opportunities are lost when we just say they'll never vote for us.
That's right.
You know, why even bother? And I see that. I see this like, especially being more so associated with the political right these days. I see more political nihilism. Like they expect to lose or surprise to win for everything. And then there's this industry like the media, which supports it.
That's right.
And tells them, yes, you will not win.
Right.
So become a subscriber and I'll tell you more ways that you won't win.
For $19.95.
Right.
And your food that'll last forever, your heirloom seeds, and your mega hat, you know, we will send you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
You know, and listen,
thing.
we know you can't afford this and you can't afford that, but you should be upset because there are black pilots now. Like it's just like, man, you guys are getting the pony show. Like this is all BS.
Right.
That's why, like, that's where I'm like, none of this is working. All of this is stupid. All of this is just one big show. Like I was talking about the campus protests that are happening. Well, I think it's kind of died down now, of course, because the cameras start going away.
Right.
But like Columbia and UCLA.
Right.
And I remember seeing it, I'm like, okay, I get like there's people who support both sides or whatever. But I'm like, who are these people though?
Yeah, I was about to say, okay, is this about Hamas and Israel? Gaza and Israel? Okay. Oh, there's so much going on. Okay, right. So that's the question. Who are you? Right. And why do I keep seeing you at every single protest? and why are you 50 pretending to be a college kid? Like, who deployed you? That should be the question we're asking. Who is paying you to be here? Yes.
But even more so, I started noticing it's both perspectives. It's both sides of the argument. And then I just started seeing like people just show up. And it made me think about how people describe the Civil War, where it was kind of like, I think it was Civil War. I don't think it was Revolutionary War, but I think it was the Civil War, how they described like two brigades will meet up here and fight. And there's, you know, blood, mayhem, and everything else around it was just, nobody knew what was going on. Like, it was just kind of like,
I think that's Civil War.
It was a Civil War? Okay. That's what I was thinking. So it was kind of like chaos and then nothing, like everybody's just living their lives or whatever's going on. That's what it felt like. It's like a manufactured conflict. It's like, all right, this is the new battleground. We're all going to meet up here. There's a bunch of cameras. You got the independent media guys, you know, waiting for the moment where something crazy happens. Oh, a cop, you know, pepper sprays the leftist, die, you know, and then they play it on a loop on Fox News, and you know, it just becomes like this, like everything. It just
the greatest show on earth.
It's the greatest show on earth for a couple weeks.
That's right.
And then they move on to the next thing. I was like, all of this seems so fake. All of it seems so fake, and that's where that was like one of the things I was like, I don't even know what to think about this anymore.
Right. So that's why we have these conversations. So I have to call some. I'll call my colleagues, my mutuals. I'm like, what do you think about this? What's really going on? And my opinions and my observations are informed by a number of sources. You know, discernment being a big one. But just watching how, having a keen understanding of how people are manipulated.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's my lens with which I look at anything going on. Okay. Yeah. For instance, yes, it's true. We have a conflict. The Israelis were kidnapped, slaughtered, raped, maimed, murdered, awful, October 7th. Yes, check. That happened. Gazans have had a beef with them forever. Yes, check. That's true. They believe they live in an open air prison. Yes, that's true. We have their media people actually kidnapping and housing the people they've kidnapped while reporting on the war in Gaza. Check. That's true. Okay. So and we talked about this earlier today. I'm a person who I wish and I hope and I know and I pray that Thirst Entertainment Network is going to be the the champion of this, that this is my hope, that we'll be able to get people back to a place where more than one thing can be true about something.
Right.
About a subject, about a person, about our history, about our country, about our future, about a politician, about a bishop, about whatever. To get out of this binary, nope, it's black or white, it's Republican, it's Democrat, it's liberal, it's this, it's good, it's evil. It's like, well, okay, maybe the good and evil thing. But even that has become so subjective where we can't even look at something to discern whether or not something's literally holy or unholy without peering through a political lens. And that is a problem.
I have a big problem with that. Because that, to me, deciphering what's good and evil requires you to be principled about it. And so if this guy's a pedophile, it doesn't matter if he's a Democrat or Republican.
That's right. Gotta go.
Who the fuck cares?
Exactly.
Like, what matters is that this guy's a pedophile and that's evil.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if my thing is, if you're a Republican, you attack a Democrat because they do this behavior, and you don't attack a Republican because they do that behavior, then you're inconsistent. Then you're being partisan. Mm-hmm. Then you don't actually care about the action. Mm-hmm. You care about the attack.
Correct.
Right? And so if you...
On the party,
mm-hmm. You want to attack the party, and this person...
The party, coincidentally, that no longer exists because it really is a uniparty now. So, yeah, okay.
I mean, in some ways, yes.
Yeah.
But in other ways, I think people look at this like it's a sport.
Yes. It's a blood sport.
Right.
It is a blood sport.
Because even, I'm a sports fan, even sports fans will just be like,
yeah.
But they really do.
This is to the death.
Some of them,
And verbally, it's to the death. Yeah. Like I just recently took a Twitter hiatus, or X, whatever we're doing. I took a hiatus, and it was about 45 days. Took it off my app, took it off my phone, kept it on my desktop. If I had to do something with work, I'd go on there and tweet. But for the most part, I was not engaging. And because I recognized that I was getting caught up in the blood sport, primarily because I was a target of a lot of it. Mm. And people think you're strong, you're courageous, you're all these things and blah, blah. And that's nice. I thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. But I'm human. And we're all humans. And we forget that just beyond your little thumbs or your keyboard warring, that there's a human being on the other side of that.
Yeah.
And words really do affect people. And we do have the power of life and death. And so what's interesting is whenever I meet some of these clowns offline, they're actually very different people.
Yeah.
Very different people. And so, excuse me, I took a hiatus because I needed it for my own mental health break. And because I recognized that I was becoming unrecognizable to myself. And I'm like, well, this is crazy because I'm responsible for informing others and keeping others relatively grounded during a time when there's great upheaval and people are scared and they're not sleeping at night and they're not going to church and they don't feel like they can trust the church and they hate politicians, but Trump's got to win or we're all going to die. You know, it's just it is mayhem. It is craziness. So you got to, that's why I did an entire podcast with a new partner of mine, Chris Cairns, who you've had on your show. Mm-hmm. And he's with us at Thirst Entertainment Network. And we did an entire series on burnout because I was at that place where I'm like, I can't afford to burn out. There's too much work to do.
Right.
There's too much to look forward to. There's too much rebuilding. And here's the thing. I kind of feel like one of the advantages I have over some folks in seeing what's happening with the country is when my husband was diagnosed with ALS, we were both very young. We had a baby. She was 2. She was actually 1 when he was diagnosed, and she was 3 when he passed. But no one could believe it because he was so young. You know, who gets ALS? Black gentlemen. First of all, that's not even prevalent within the Black ethnicity at all. Said not at that time. So it was like, what the heck? You know, he's very healthy. He was an athlete, very strong. We just started our lives. And so we're like, this doesn't make any sense. And then he was gone. A month after his diagnosis, he was on life support. The day I put him on life support, I knew in my spirit he wasn't going to make it because the doctor told me what he had. And I received it. We still tried things to see if it would work, but I was the first person in the family to accept that I was going to lose him. And I had a child to protect and to take care of. I had a future to preserve. So where I'm going with this is here. Everyone else in the family thought I was just mean or nuts or whatever, or just I had disassociated. I'm like, no, this is going to happen. And I have to prepare because it's already happened. He's still here with us. It's already happened. That's how I see the country. Mm-hmm. The country, we're not the Titanic. We're not waiting to hit the iceberg. We hit it a long time ago. And so now it's time for people to pull up their bootstraps, lock arms with fellow Americans, and get busy rebuilding the country. I'm not trying to save this country. I'm interested in rebuilding the country. Yeah. And that's another impetus for Thirst Entertainment Network, because that's our heart. That's our mind behind what we're doing. So it's tough because people will see me as a black pillar, as a nihilist, as a fatalist, because while I do think people should get out and vote, I would never tell people not to get out and vote. What I see is a broken election grid, and that's a problem. And I don't know that we're going to overcome it this election cycle either. Now we have a bear in the living room.
Should we wake him up?
You probably going to want to sit up.
Oh, I thought he was completely out.
Well, that's hilarious. Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. On that note, I think I'll take another sip of my cocktail. Yeah.
That's a very interesting analogy that you made.
It's a hard place to be.
Yeah.
Because I'm a realist, but I'm also an optimist. Mm-hmm. I'm a Christian. How can I be anything but optimistic? And when I say that, I don't mean, woohoo, hashtag God wins. Let's all create another Jesus meme. It's like, we know God wins. He already won. What is your point? Get out and vote. Get out and do your civic duty. Quit sitting around abdicating all of your civic authority that you have in this country to politicians and to the other team and to, well, we're going to lose anyway. And it's like, yeah, you're right. We keep going through the same. We lose the Congress. We gain the Congress. We have a lame duck Congress as Republicans. As Republicans, we charge the hill, we take the hill, and we run right back down the other side of the hill. And that's historically what we've done. It is evident in almost every election cycle, at least in my lifetime. So it's a tough place to be because I have had to run my own, like I'm a bit of a general in that way. I've had to run my own camp over here for years as a single mother. And so I can't afford to not do risk assessment. I can't afford not to plan contingencies. I have a mouth to feed. I have a child to raise. I had to do that on my own. And thank God with the church and with others, very few people, but with the grace of God, by the power of the Holy Spirit and the spirit of wisdom, I sat in that book in the Holy Bible and found my life and found life for her and found wisdom and nuggets. It's gonna make me cry. Especially because you're here to be baptized this weekend. But I found my life in that book, and I found a prescription for life, and I roll all of that over into politics, how to be a decent citizen, how to be a good neighbor, how to be a thoughtful voter, how to get out and actually communicate with them, and how to shape narratives for cultures. Part of one of the greatest benefits I've had was writing. I was nonpartisan, wasn't even registered to vote whenever I first started writing for politicians. And I would go and I would study their demographics. And I wrote for this so I would know how to shape the narrative of the speeches. Mm-hmm. And it's just a natural gift. Didn't go to school for it. Always been a writer. And the beautiful part was at the time, it was in DeKalb County, Georgia. There was someone running for a judicial seat. And he was a little white man who just recently retired because his community loved him so much. His constituency loved him. They kept him all these years. But he was running in a predominantly Black area. But dude, we went to that's when people are like, how do we win them? I'm like, you've lost the battle already because you see them as different from you.
Right.
You see their kids as different from yours. You see their challenges as different from yours. And here's what's different. Law enforcement challenges. Those have always historically been different for Black Americans, period, full stop. Anyone who would deny that is a liar or just has their heads in their butts. So when we're going around talking about electing a law enforcement official, these people wanted to know, do you care about us and our kids? Like, are you going to do anything to make the community better and safer for our children so they don't get caught up in this mess and end up in front of you in your court? And what we learned, though, what I learned, and I did grow up in Black churches singing Black gospel, but going to all these different churches and watching him embraced it my God, we must have eaten our weight in barbecue for like the entire election cycle, chicken wings, barbecue. And so, I mean, but we were embraced and we embraced the demographic, and he was not slated to win that seat. And he did, because people don't forget how you make them feel.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I'm so glad you said that, because whenever I've talked to certain people behind the scenes, and I'm like, well, one, you don't try to win the Black vote.
That's right.
You don't. I know that's the thing that we like to talk about, but that's not actually what you do. Right. If let's say you're the governor. If you're the governor of a state, you're the governor for the entire state.
That's right.
So what do? Well, you listen to the people that you're governing. So what do they need? So if this area has a lot of Black people, all right, well, there just happen to be a lot of Black people who live there.
Right.
But what do they need?
That's right.
What are they asking for? What are they talking about? Did you talk to them? But as soon as you see it as, well...
No, because they have to hire a Black person to go talk to the Black people.
But you don't.
And I'm like, but you don't. Exactly. Thank you. But you don't.
You don't.
No.
You can go there. Just don't act like Joe Biden.
Right. Don't bring your hot sauce, Hillary.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't pretend that you live this particular life.
Right.
Just talk to them like they're people.
That's right.
And that's been the most frustrating thing to watch about politics.
Yeah.
From both sides. They don't know how to talk to certain demographics like they're people.
That's right.
Guess what? They might be Black. They might look different than you. Look they got kids. They got a family. Like, as I've kind of said this before a couple times, the political right doesn't believe the mainstream media. Thinks they're lying and all that. But they believe narratives about other groups.
Yes.
And I'm like, so you don't believe CNN, but you believe when CNN says that the number one issue that Black Americans care about is racism?
Right.
Well, does that make sense at all?
Right.
Have you talked to Black Americans? And every time there's legit polling, economics, safety.
That's right.
I don't know, the same thing everybody cares about.
That's right.
Funny how that works.
Right.
So even the people in the hood care about economics and safety.
Right.
And when their economics improve, they like these people. When their safety improves, they like these people.
Right.
And the color part doesn't matter. They like we're racial, but like we'll be like, I mess with that white dude.
Right.
Like that's just
right.
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 And like, but he cool.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
Don't talk like that.
Right.
Don't take it too personal.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like, I feel like it's so missing is that there is a human element to this. You should be able to see that woman who is trying to raise a child in a dangerous neighborhood like your mother.
That's right. Would
you want your mother to go through that? Do you want to just say, well, you know what? Her hair looks different than mine. Her skin complexion is different. So her circumstance is different than mine. It's like, no, you were poor too.
That's right.
And just because she's Black doesn't mean that you can't understand what she's going through. She's a human being. I think that human element is so missing because everybody is looking at racial politics.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking at demographic politics. And I'm like, but where's the human part?
Okay. So I'm going to push back a little bit on that. I agree with everything you said, particularly the human element. But here's one area I'm going to push back in the sense that going back to the trickle down effect of Obama's rhetoric, It was kind of like a bad IV drip around race discussions in the country. The next thing you saw was the rise of BLM. And the next thing you saw was the rise of the FBAs, who, for those of you in your audience who don't know, Foundational Black Americans, who are largely bent on reparations. Wherever people land on that, so be it. I have my own opinions on all of that. But what you saw was this, it was like, well, you're the colonizer. You're not Black, so shut up.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how we feel. And white people en masse were told to just shut the hell up. You're not us. And don't tell us you don't see color, because we know by virtue of our history that you damn sure see color. Okay. And white people were really dumb about, well, I don't see color. I'm like, well, that's just stupid. Of course you see color. Like, we're not colorblind. Come on. And you can't deny the history of the country, but you also don't have to hang yourself to the proverbial cross of reparations in the way of, well, here's our reparations plan. Everybody who's white, just shut the hell up because you're colonizers and you owe a great debt to the world. And it's like, well, hold on. So don't tell me that, like, I've hosted spaces, I've hosted shows where people are like, what are you talking about? Nobody wants to hear from you. You're white. Shut up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, but you're not going to get me to shut up. You know why? Because I do give a damn, because I do care, because I do drive through your congressional district where you have named bridges after this man and roadways that hasn't done a damn thing for your district in over 30 years. So don't tell me I can't care about you and your children and your education and your safety, because I do care about you, no matter whether you like it or not. And so I do have a voice, and you're not going to silence me through the shame of the national sins of our past, which are shameful. We know that. But I'm also not going to be beat up over it or silenced because you have some kind of a beef with the past that you're now dragging into today, because you now have a bigger political microphone. People have incentivized you to be pissed off about it constantly. They've told you that you've been slighted your whole life. You're never going to get a leg up. Again, the drip, drip, drip of the Obama academia tour. And it's like, and I think some white people just decided, I'm just going to apologize and put my little BLM sign in my lawn, and they will leave me alone. Maybe they won't destroy my home. Maybe when they come through, and I was part of the Summer of Love where I live. My neighborhood was right on the edge of that. So I saw what was coming from down the street, and I saw my little wealthy white neighbors who are probably liberals, which is fine, with all of their BLM signs in their lawns. Like, it was almost like I'm not going to use that analogy. That would be very sacrilegious, but it was like, they were putting a covering over their house to be like, pass us by because we're on your team. And I'm like, but are you? Do you even know what the plight of the average Black American is in America? What you think a lawn sign for BLM or a donation is somehow going to make life easier for Black Americans? And so that was the easy way out for a lot of people. But it was also a way to silence people in the way of, you're not allowed to care because of the history. And so as a Christian, and I've gone toe to toe with some of the largest FBA names, and am happy to do so. And we've done it respectfully, but they make fun of me, and that's fine. But I said, you know what? All of our sins were paid for on that cross. And I'm not suggesting that there's not a place for people to, because other ethnicities have received reparations for national sins that were perpetuated against them. So I get it. My concern is that it's a soul wound. It's not a monetary wound.
Yeah.
It's a soul wound. And until that is healed, until it's ministered to outside of the political realm, and until the church quits being black and white and right and left, and until the church gets rid of its 501c3 status in order to do that. I'm a huge proponent of that. I don't make many friends with that rhetoric, by the way, even as a minister, but I'm a firm believer that we get our voices back by no longer segregating along color lines, even within the body of Christ. But until that happens, it doesn't matter how much money someone throws at you. That has to be a generational reconciling. And it started at the cross, but it is up to us to reconcile those things from generation to generation. So for white people who say, well, that was back then, they just need to get it. Them and they drives me nuts. They just need to get over it. I'm like, I don't think you understand how generational trauma actually works on a cellular level, on a sin level, and how some of these things get passed down. And until someone takes responsibility, or by nailing all of this crap to the cross of Christ where it belongs, and picking up their mantle and walking as men and women of God who walk in their God-given authority, not government-given authority, not even the U.S. Constitution's given authority. It's your God-given authority to live as a free man and woman, right? And until you own that, and you are on your own knees at night, trusting God to bring you the opportunities to bring your family up and out of poverty, and to build bridges with people who don't look like you, who don't think like you, till you start believing for that favor, you start speaking that favor over your kids, and you take your kids back and step away from all of the partisan rhetoric. I don't know how you recover that any other way. And people will laugh me off of social media talking like this because they're interested in retribution. Exactly where Trump is right now. Exactly what I warned his campaign about 2 years ago when I got a call from someone asking for my opinion on something. And I said, I'm going to tell you right now, if you all do not quell this rhetoric of revenge, you're going down a really dark and a very bad path.
Right.
Because there's a difference between justice and revenge. It's a really fine line, and it's hard for some people to see it, but he was encouraged to cross it and to go for the revenge. And that's hence how we've ended up with the bloodlust society. And I see the same thing happen within the conversation of race relations in this country. It's very bothersome because to me, there's a very simple, it's a simple solution without diminishing the magnitude of what has actually occurred to Black Americans in this country. So, again, 10 things can be true. And you can, what happened to our scales? What is the plumb line of our scale in this country? That's the question I'm asking. And so with Thirst, for me, it's really simple. Between our talent, between our executive staff, between our audience, it's a sophisticated balance of people who think, who feel, who want to be connected, who are connected to their creator, and who want to be reconnected to, people and be responsible for bridge building.
Yeah. I think with some of I think you're right when it comes to the revenge, but I also think there's an aspect of jealousy when we have the discussion about reparations, and I usually don't talk about it at all, because to me it's like arguing over the tooth fairy. Like it's not real.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
Right.
I've accepted that a long time ago. Right. So why are we talking about it? I think it's so sad. Hours, weeks talking about a thing that's nowhere near to happen.
All the things. Yes.
The most they ever got was California to have a committee. And you know what that committee came up with ridiculous numbers that would bankrupt the state. And you know what Gavin Newsom said? Oh, just look at it another way. Yeah, you were never going to get it. Wow. This was all a gesture. Right. So I'm like, that's why I don't engage in the conversation.
I'm with you.
Yeah. And by the way, that person that we were talking about earlier, someone was like, you should go and talk to him about, I was like, I would never go and talk. I wouldn't talk to any of these people about like, why? Ever. Why would I talk about this?
Yeah. I wasn't even talking about reparations in my space one day. Ended up with 5,000 FBAs in my Twitter space. I was like, okay, let's talk about it, I guess. Okay.
Yeah. So, but I do think that there's an element of revenge, and it's coming from a place that is coming from a place of hatred. And so when you
is it hatred or lack of identity or both?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Okay.
I have so many theories about this, but I think when you're examining something and you're saying this is bad, right? So we were just talking about being principled. If it's bad to discriminate against a Black person and say, well, this Black person did something bad, hence you must be bad too. Then it is also bad when you reverse or switch the race to somebody else. And I think there's that element as well where they can't see that. There is no, that's why I stopped messing with people who just aren't principled like that. This isn't about me as a Black guy trying to stick up for white people. I'm talking about what's moral. Is it moral? Is this right? Are you consistent? Let's say this is how you actually believe. Then believe that no matter what they look like.
That's right.
But they can't do that. Why? Because it's not about the discrimination. It's about winning. It's about gaining something. It's about revenge. It's about everything else besides everything else except for the principle of the matter. And so that's why I don't mess with any of these people, because I know that's not how they actually feel. They don't, the discrimination part, they don't actually hate discrimination. They just hate discrimination when it hurts them. That's so you don't actually hate discrimination.
So true. Yeah, that's so true.
Right. So when you say, how dare you profile us? Shut up, white woman. Your people have done too much to us.
Exactly.
Like, you don't even hear yourself.
Rich. Right. Yes. I know. You're right. They don't hear themselves.
It's that kind of thing where there's just so much of that. I call it I don't know if there's a term for it or not, but I call it the in-group, out-group dynamic.
Okay.
Where the in-group tends to see the best of itself. Right. Look at Black excellence. Look at what we do. Right. But the out-group, they tend to see the worst. Right. So Monica is just like Derek Chauvin. Right. Right. Let's just look at all the bad white people. Yeah. And it happens. Yeah. Listen, it happens in so many ways. You can find Republicans who think every Democrat wants to trans your child. Absolutely. Yeah. You can find every Democrat. You can find a Democrat that says every Republican holds a tiki torch. Right. So you find that. But they can't see, no, that's only a few people who want to trans their kids, right? Of course. Right. So they always have this shining light on themselves, but unwilling to hold both sides equally accountable for their behavior. And so it's that in-group, out-group dynamic. And because I'm very aware of that, I'm like, I'm trying to be I'm human, I'm flawed, but I try to be as principled as possible. Like, am I engaging in this? That's right. And it is what I find a complete deficit when it comes to people actually living by that principle. Sure. And I just don't actually believe these people, because I know if the race was switched, if the party was switched, if the politician was switched, you would have a big damn problem about this. I see it with certain Trump supporters would just excuse this, right? But I know for a fact that if it was Biden that did this, you guys would be upward. Yeah. You guys would be making memes like crazy because you guys aren't actually principled. Right. Same thing goes for Democrats. Sexual assault's bad. That's right. Unless, it's our guy. Yeah. I don't know if I believe her. Believe all women. Well, not this woman, because she's definitely being paid by the Republicans. That's right. Right. So it's that kind of thing. Everyone's out for the win. Everyone. And I'm fatigued. Yeah, me too. I'm fatigued by this constant search for the win, because at the end of the day, no one wins. Right. No one wins. It's just everybody bleeds. The country bleeds. Right. I agree. And I think all of that is very deliberative. I mean, I think it's like I said, very well planned over many, many years. And knowing what makes us tick as a country, as a body of people. And so
Yeah, that's interesting. I know. Yeah, how I end up in what's interesting is I think I end up in those conversations because I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about it then. I mean, what? Fine. If I'm not in the mood, I'm not in the mood. But I happen to be in the mood that day, and one of the more notable folks with FBAs came in, and I looked down at my numbers. And I'm like, wait, how did I just go from 200 people to like 5,500? And people thought they were going to come for me, and I'm like, you can't come for me. You can't. Because I know where I stand on something. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to love you whether you like it or not. And you can call me a bigot and a Karen and whatever. I don't care. I know where I stand on something. And what was really fascinating was the time I walked into a space, there were probably 10,000 people in there. And the FBAs were leading the space, again, foundational Black Americans. And interesting dynamic. And the hatred they have toward African Americans.
Yes.
Holy crap. I was like, what did I just walk into?
It's not just Africans. It's Caribbean.
Yes.
Anyone who is not
foundational Black American. Correct. And I was like,
and if you're mixed, you don't count.
You don't count. You do not count.
I would actually not. I'll be mixed because my father's from Trinidad.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
See, you don't count. So you don't get reparations. Yeah, you like me. So you're white.
I get half the package. I get half of the reparations.
That's right. So half the package. That's right. So I
half of nothing.
Half of nothing. That's right. Half of nothing is still nothing.
Yeah.
For those of you who missed that. But yeah, it was really fascinating because I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on in here right now? And probably one of the funnier moments I've ever seen then President Trump in. I went to a Blacks for Trump event here in Atlanta. And he comes out, and of course, it's Blacks for Trump. So it's predominantly Black audience, a very exclusive group. It was they didn't have enough space for everyone. People came from all over the Southeast to see him. Buses filled with Black Americans. And I've never said African American. My husband, when that term first started rolling out, it was before he died. And he was like, don't ever call me an African American. Like, what is that? I'm not from Africa. I'm a Black man. Right. Do not ever refer to me as an African American. So I was like, okay. And I've never forgotten that. And so I just have this thing where I'm like, I get it. And the reason why I asked you, is it hatred or identity? Because I think I have a real, as a Christian, in realizing who my identity is truly rooted in, right?
Right.
My blood, my soul, my spirit. It doesn't change the fact that as a human being, we all want to know our people, right? That's just intrinsic to being a human. It's just part of us. And so think of all the people who can proudly look at their tribes and their, their Irish clans and Scottish clans and all that, who can look at their folks and be like, man, I can trace my roots all the way back to whatever. And whenever I speak to a lot of Black Americans, they have no idea who their roots are. Right. They don't. And so to me, that's missing. That is something that is foundationally missing. That is a hole again in the soul that only God can fill. And even when he fills it with his son, you've still got to reconcile that within your own soul as a human being. And so with President Trump, he comes out and he's like, okay, can we just settle this once and for all? What do you all want to be called? What do you guys want to be called? You can see him in all this glory too, right? And he's like, what do you want to be called? What is it? Are you African Americans? Are you Black? And the whole room erupts in Black, 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 Black. And I was like, oh, thank God. Hallelujah. Finally, it's settled. And he said that. He was like, okay, settled. That's it. Black Americans. And I was like, right, because that's who you are. That actually you're an American. I hate the fact that we even have to distinguish, but we do for a number of reasons. But I'm not like, oh yeah, my Black friend Adam. That's how I talk about you. And so I have a lot of Black friends. I have Black family members. But we make it this thing, and then other people make it the thing. And next thing you know, it's the thing. And ultimately, what you learn in years of ministry is that we all bleed. And we all have the same desires and insecurities and struggles and hopes.
Yeah.
They just look different. That's all. And we do have we do have oppressors in this world, undoubtedly. And they are inspired by oppressors of the other world. And it doesn't matter what color they are, or what ethnicity. We see that with the Jews and really the world right now, which is all being prophetically, culminating in this prophetic timeline. But when you see it, when I see things through that lens, and I can keep my lenses on and straight, I'm not offended by those conversations. You can't move me from where I sit on something, because you're right. It is the principle of a thing.
Right.
And that stays intact no matter what. Now, I may get salty. I may get sassy. I may fight back if somebody comes at me, but my general principle, I'm not moving. That's my plumb line. That's where I'm staying. Your life matters. My life matters. There. Okay. The grifters are always going to grift. People are always going to capitalize on division. And at the end of the day, the question you have to ask yourself is, if my fellow American knocks on my door naked, hungry, or just tired and in danger, am I going to feed them, clothe them, and love them and protect them? That's it. That's the question that we all have to ask ourselves. And there may come a time in the very near future where we have to rely upon each other to that degree, where it doesn't matter what freaking color you are, because I need help right now, or you need help.
Right.
And so I think we got to get back to those basic principles.
I agree with you. And man, I do think that there is a level of idolatry that happens when it comes to, and so it's clear, I do understand the aspect of not knowing your full background.
Yeah.
And I've explained to people, like, the same way you would call someone Italian American is the same way that many Black Americans see themselves. Like, that's it. Yeah. It doesn't mean that they hate you. It doesn't mean that they're trying to disassociate with anything. That's just how. Sure. It's just an identifier. Right. That's all. Yeah, I'm like Greek, German American. Right. I get it. Yeah. So it's that kind of thing, and sometimes I think that's lost in just trying to understand that perspective. But I do think that there's a lot of idolatry to identity, because there are a lot of people who are lost. But it's very interesting, though, because prior to getting into this, I stopped being lost. And even with writing the book, I wrote the book because I knew, and I was comfortable with how I felt, and so much so that I didn't tell really anybody except for, like, we weren't married at the time, but I told Michelle and a few friends. That's it. I didn't tell my mom, didn't tell my family, didn't tell my job. And I said, I don't know what's going to happen. I could get fired. I have no idea, but I'm fine with whatever happens, because that's how much I actually believe in this. That's right. And most people aren't willing to do that. That's right. And so when you come to me and call me a coon, that does not bother me. Right. I was willing to risk all that stuff because I wanted to say exactly how I felt. That's right. So sorry, rando person on the internet, you don't bother me by calling me that. Right. And it's so interesting that when you're so sure in yourself, that stuff doesn't bother you whatsoever. It's the people that aren't sure in themselves. Those are the people who go on these rants. Those are the people who want to fight back. When I see stuff like that, I literally laugh. The only time it ever bothers me, if it's someone that I've interacted with, like I know. Yes. Like, man, we were hanging out. Now you're coming. Yeah. You know what? Forget it. Right. But I'll never forget. I wrote an article for the New York Post talking about America Fest I went to one year. And the synopsis of it was, they keep saying that the Republican Party is centered around race and hatred of race. Funny, because I went to America Fest and no one talked about it. Right. So if that's not even a little, not even a little. So if this is the central thing, then they're falling short. Yeah, they're falling real short of it. So Roland Martin was Roland. Yeah, Roland Martin. Okay. who always thinks he's the smartest man in the room.
Yeah.
So he tweeted and tagged me. I remember I oddly woke up like 1 a.m, and I just happened to look at my phone, and I was like, Roland Martin. So he tagged me and put my link to my article, and he said, "This guy saying that America Fist was the kumbaya," or some shit like that. And I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
No. Block.
Yep.
Moved on with my
Exactly.
life. Because I realized from that point, and that's how I treated it, you're talking about me because I'm more relevant than you.
Right.
So no, I am not giving you my time, my energy, my effort. Blocked it, moved on, felt great, went back to sleep.
Good for you.
And that's how I started realizing this is the left likes to talk about power dynamics and stuff like that. But actually, this is a power dynamic. When people say, Monica, and then you respond, boom, they just took some of your power.
I know. And I just was guilty of that yesterday. Somebody trying to tag me with Dan Bongino, of all people. Monica's a fatalist, a nihilist around the elections. I'm like, okay. All right. So I was like, all right, hold on. Let me stretch for this one. So I was like, all right, I got something to say. And I did go for him because I was like, first of all, people don't know, like you said, it's a cost benefit analysis. Everything I do has a cost benefit analysis. Now, doesn't mean my principles change. It doesn't mean I'm not going to do something that I know I should do, or cover something that I should cover, or highlight, amplify something. But there's a cost benefit analysis to everything. And that's just part of being wise and mature. Particularly in our industry, I wish more people, we will deploy this with Thirst Entertainment Network, but I wish others would. Not everything needs to be shared. Not every story needs to be highlighted. Not everything has to run to be the first person at the, water cooler to announce it with bullhorns and lights and all that.
Right.
And timing is important, and knowing your audience and respecting them and loving them and knowing their saturation point. You got to know what the saturation point is with your audience. Right. And I think that's just responsible reporting. But I'm I'm keenly aware of what it's cost me to support the integrity of elections in this country.
Right.
And it cost me a lot. And it has cost me relationships, money, security, safety, a lot. And so when someone comes for me to say, you're leading your audience down the wrong path, that's something that makes me like, I can visualize throat punching you, right? Because I'm like, you have no idea how much I love my audience and how much respect I have for them, and how much that has cost me. And it's just part of the cost of doing business with integrity. Yeah.
Well, we're going to wrap up. Quick question. Are you optimistic about the future?
I am optimistic about the future, in a number of different ways. I'm optimistic because I believe our stupid little memes of God wins and God's still on the throne, and it's like, yeah, that's actually true. That is true. And instead of waiting for God to like appear and part the clouds and suck all the good Christians up, I'm probably going to be left behind, if that's actually true, to lead the charge for people to believe that he still exists and that there's still a reason to hope. So yes, I do believe as long as we have breath in our lungs and we have ideas and we have love in our hearts, there's every reason to be positive. And positive is subjective. I think we're going to go through some really hard times, but I think, eternally speaking and temporally, there's every reason to hope because we serve the God of hope.
Very well said. Once again, thank you for hosting me inside your home. And I really did enjoy the conversation.
Me too. Thank you. It's a pleasure.